There are flowers that should never have been found, petals that harbor something ancient, something that existed before human civilization understood the concept of contagion. Deep beneath the earth in West Africa, in caverns that predate written history, grew a species of plant that the Undapaya people called the stairway to the sun. These flowers were not simply beautiful or rare, they were death in botanical form, containing within their genetic structure a virus that would eventually become the foundation of humanity's most catastrophic bioweapon, the tyrant virus, better known as the T virus. The story of the T virus begins not in a sterile laboratory with men in white coats manipulating DNA sequences, but in darkness, in underground chambers where sunlight was bent and reflected through ingenious engineering, where ancient kings consumed poison to prove their worthiness to rule, where mutation was mistaken for divinity. The Indapaya kingdom thrived for centuries, perhaps millennia, built upon a ritual that modern science would later recognize as viral infection. Their leaders were not chosen by bloodline or combat prowess, but by survival. Those who ate the stairway to the sun and lived through the horrific transformation, the fever, the cellular breakdown, the genetic rewriting, emerged as something more than human, enhanced strength, unnaturally long life, perhaps even genius level intellect. Then Dapaya worshipped these survivors as god kings, unaware that what they were witnessing was not divine intervention, but a double stranded RNA virus expressing itself in human tissue. The flowers themselves were ecological anomalies. They required specific environmental conditions to produce the virus. The exact humidity, temperature, and soil composition found only in certain areas of the Ndapaya caverns. Remove the flowers from this environment, and they became merely beautiful, merely toxic, but not transformative. The virus remained dormant, inactive, locked within junk DNA that would never express itself. This specificity would later prove to be Umbrella Corporation's greatest challenge. You cannot weaponize what you cannot cultivate. You cannot mass produce a bioweapon that requires the precise recreation of a prehistoric ecosystem. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before Umbrella, before laboratories, before the T virus had a name or a military designation, there were only the Ndapaya and their sacred flowers. The tribe constructed elaborate architectural system within their underground city, reflective surfaces that channeled sunlight through impossible angles, concentrated beams of light that could burn flesh, automated defense systems powered by nothing more than geometry and solar energy. This was Stone Age engineering that surpassed anything their contemporaries built above ground. How? The virus. Those god kings who survived the stairway to the sun brought back more than just enhanced physical capabilities. They brought back enhanced cognition, the ability to conceptualize and execute construction projects that should have been impossible for their level of technological development. Yet despite their advancement, the Ndapaya kingdom fell. Ancient murals discovered in the ruins suggest the downfall was sudden and catastrophic. The same virus that elevated their kings to godhood also infected local wildlife. Animals exposed to the flowers or to viral contamination in the water supply mutated into aggressive, powerful variants of their normal selves. The engravings show these creatures escaping containment, attacking the population, overwhelming even the tribe's warrior class. Whether the Ndapaya deliberately experimented on animals or whether the contamination was accidental remains unknown. What is certain is that the city was abandoned, left to decay in darkness for centuries. The survivors fled to the marshlands, establishing smaller settlements away from the caverns. But they did not forget. The underground ruins remained sacred. forbidden to outsiders. Young warriors of the tribe spent 2-year rotations guarding the old city, ensuring that no one would stumble upon the Garden of the Sun, the central chamber where the stairway to the sunflowers grew in concentrated clusters. This cultural taboo protected the world from the progenitor virus for generations. The Ndapaya kept the secret through warfare and vigilance, killing or driving away anyone who ventured too close to the ruins. Then came the 19th century, and with it, European colonialism. Henry Travis, son of a prominent British merchant family, led expeditions throughout Africa, documenting flora, fauna, indigenous cultures, and folklore. His 72-volume encyclopedia, Survey of Natural History, contained meticulous descriptions of everything he encountered, including detailed accounts of Ndapaya legends. Travis recorded stories about the stairway to the sun, about tribal kings who ate poisonous flowers and emerged transformed, about an ancient underground city guarded by warriors who would die before revealing its location. He documented these tales with scholarly precision, treating them as anthropological curiosities rather than literal truth. The European academic community dismissed Travis's work. The idea of an advanced Stone Age civilization existing in sub-Saharan Africa contradicted prevailing racial theories of the time. The notion that consuming a toxic flower could grant superhuman abilities was filed away as primitive superstition, the kind of magical thinking that civilized science had moved beyond. Travis's encyclopedias gathered dust in university libraries, read by almost no one, remembered by fewer. Almost no one, but not quite no one. In the mid-1960s, an Anglo-American eugenics circle stumbled upon Travis's work. These were not fringe conspiracists or mad scientists, but educated, wealthy individuals who believed that human evolution could be guided, accelerated, perfected through scientific intervention. Among them were 3 men who would forever alter the course of bioweapons development: Lord Oswell E. Spencer, a British aristocrat with vast financial resources and connections to military intelligence; Dr. Edward Ashford, a respected virologist from a family with generational ties to pharmaceutical research; and Dr. James Marcus, a brilliant but eccentric biologist whose academic career had been marked by both genius and ethical controversy. Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus became obsessed with Travis's accounts of the Ndapaya rituals. If the legends were true, if a naturally occurring substance could trigger beneficial mutations in humans, then the implications for eugenics were staggering. This was not selective breeding or genetic counseling, the standard approaches of the era. This was forced evolution at the viral level, the possibility of creating a superhuman race not through generational selection but through direct biological intervention. The group theorized that Travis had encountered a mutagenic virus hosted by the flowers, a virus that killed most subjects but transformed the survivors. They called this hypothetical pathogen progenitor, meaning ancestor or originator. If it existed, if it could be isolated and studied, if it could be controlled, then progenitor would be the progenitor of a new stage in human development. Spencer imagined a world ruled by those enhanced by the virus, an elite class of superhuman beings with himself as their architect and leader. Ashford approached the concept more scientifically, interested in pure research for its own sake. Marcus saw both potential, weapons, and evolution intertwined. In 1966, the 3 men organized an expedition to West Africa, specifically to the Kajuju region where Travis had encountered the Ndapaya. Spencer provided the funding. Ashford contributed his scientific expertise. Marcus brought his student Brandon Bailey, a young researcher who would prove instrumental in later virus cultivation efforts. They spent 3 months searching for the underground city, fighting periodic skirmishes with Undapaya warriors who defended their ancestral home with primitive weapons and superior terrain knowledge. The local population knew what these outsiders sought, and they knew what would happen if the flowers fell into foreign hands. But superior numbers and modern firearms eventually prevailed. On December 4th, 1966, the expedition located the entrance to the cavern system. They descended into darkness that was not quite darkness, illuminated by those ancient light reflection systems that still functioned after centuries of neglect. They navigated past traps, pressure plates that triggered rock falls, concentrated solar beams that could incinerate flesh, flooding mechanisms designed to drown invaders. They reached the Garden of the Sun. The flowers grew in a natural terraced arrangement, cascading down rock formations in the specific microclimate that allowed viral expression. Bailey carefully collected samples, flowers, soil, root systems, everything that might be necessary to recreate the growing conditions. Marcus conducted preliminary tests on site, confirming that the flowers contained an active viral agent. The expedition had found their progenitor. They confirmed the virus's existence and its properties through initial field analysis. It was indeed an RNA-based retrovirus, similar in structure to filoviruses like Ebola or Marburg, both of which also originated in Africa. Like those deadly pathogens, Progenitor thrived in dark, cool, humid environments. But unlike Ebola, which killed through hemorrhagic fever, Progenitor killed through mutation. It integrated itself into host DNA, rewriting genetic instructions, triggering uncontrolled cellular transformation. Most subjects died as their bodies tore themselves apart trying to accommodate the viral rewrites. But some survived, and those survivors exhibited the enhanced capabilities that Ndapaya legend had described. The expedition left the caverns in December 1966, taking their samples and leaving the Undapaya warriors to contemplate their failure to protect what had been sacred for generations. Many young Undapaya had consumed the flowers in desperate attempts to gain the strength needed to repel the invaders, only to die from the virus. The foreigners had stolen not just plants, but the tribe's future, without access to their own sacred flower, without the ritual that selected their leaders. The Undapaya's cultural structure began to collapse. Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus returned with samples they could not use. This became immediately apparent when they attempted to cultivate the flowers in European and American facilities. The transported plants grew, but they did not produce the virus. Bailey spent months adjusting variables, different soil compositions, temperature ranges, humidity levels, light exposure, but nothing triggered viral expression outside the specific conditions of the Undapaya caverns. The flowers had become ornamental, beautiful, but useless for their purposes. This represented a critical problem. Their eugenics project required a consistent supply of progenitor for research and experimentation. They could not repeatedly send expeditions to West Africa, fighting hostile locals each time they needed more samples. The virus had to be cultivated, controlled, made accessible. But how do you replicate an environment that evolved over millennia in a specific geological formation? The answer, it turned out, required years of additional research and significant financial investment. But first, they needed a cover. 3 scientists openly researching a mutagenic virus from West Africa would attract immediate attention from regulatory bodies, ethics committees, and potentially rival research groups. They needed legitimacy, the appearance of respectability, a public face that would allow private experimentation. In March 1967, just 3 months after returning from Africa, Spencer founded Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. The name was deliberately chosen. An umbrella shelters, protects, covers. It suggested benevolence, public health, corporate responsibility. The company's public face focused on pharmaceutical development, health products, consumer goods, umbrella branded shampoo, toothpaste, pain relievers, antibiotics. The profits from these legitimate products would fund the real research, the hidden work on Progenitor. From the beginning, Umbrella was a front. Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus were not interested in curing diseases or improving public health except as means to an end. The end was the Wesker Project, Spencer's plan to use mutagenic viruses to create a superior human race with himself as its architect and leader. But such research required money, infrastructure, and political protection. Umbrella Pharmaceuticals provided all three. It became one of the world's largest pharmaceutical corporations, with facilities on multiple continents, research laboratories hidden beneath legitimate production facilities, and enough wealth to buy political influence in dozens of countries. The three founders each took responsibility for separate research initiatives, establishing laboratories to pursue independent progenitor studies. This division of labor made sense practically. More researchers meant faster progress, but it also reflected the growing tension between the three men. Spencer was revealed to be not just a financial backer, but a manipulator with totalitarian ambitions. Ashford remained focused on pure research, uncomfortable with the military application Spencer clearly intended. Marcus grew increasingly paranoid, suspecting that Spencer wanted to steal his work and claim credit for any breakthroughs. Ashford established a research facility in Antarctica at his family estate, isolated and secure. Spencer set up operations in the Arklay Mountains outside Raccoon City in the United States, building a mansion that served as cover for an underground laboratory. Marcus was initially supposed to continue progenitor research at a European facility, but Spencer had different plans for him. Spencer recognized that Marcus was both valuable and dangerous. Valuable because his understanding of virology was unmatched among the three founders. Dangerous because his growing paranoia and his obsessive dedication to research made him unpredictable. Spencer needed Marcus where he could be watched, where his work could be monitored and controlled. In 1968, Spencer convinced Marcus to take a position as director of the newly established Umbrella Executive Training School in the Arklay Mountains. This facility was ostensibly designed to train future Umbrella employees, teaching them company protocols, pharmaceutical development procedures, and corporate culture. The reality was darker. The school was an indoctrination center, conditioning young minds to accept the ethical violations necessary for bioweapons research. Students learned to view human test subjects as data points, to prioritize results over morality, to serve Umbrella's goals without question. And beneath the training school, Marcus had a private laboratory where he could continue his progenitor work while simultaneously grooming the next generation of Umbrella scientists. Marcus accepted the position, though he resented being pulled away from pure research. He threw himself into both roles, teaching and experimentation, with characteristic obsession. His teaching methods were rigorous, his standards impossibly high, his expectations brutal. Most students washed out. Those who remained were shaped into exactly what Spencer needed. Brilliant, amoral researchers loyal to Umbrella above all else. But Marcus's real focus remained the virus. The progenitor samples Bailey had collected were finite, and without a way to cultivate more, the entire project would eventually hit a wall. Marcus experimented with different approaches to viral cultivation, different host organisms, different environmental controls. Nothing worked. The virus remained stubbornly tied to its original ecosystem. Then, in September 1968, Bailey, now running a research station back in the West African caverns, made a breakthrough. By studying the local environmental factors in minute detail, he identified the specific combination of conditions necessary for viral expression. Temperature had to be within a precise range. Humidity needed exact levels. The soil composition required trace minerals in specific ratios. Light exposure had to follow particular day-night cycles, mimicking the natural light reflection in the caverns. It was an incredibly narrow window, but it was achievable in a laboratory setting. Bailey began cultivating new progenitor samples at what became known as the African Lab, shipping them to Marcus at the training facility. For the first time, the three founders had access to a renewable supply of the virus. Research could proceed in earnest. But that same year, 1968, brought tragedy that was not quite tragedy. Edward Ashford died from exposure to progenitor virus during a laboratory accident at his Antarctic facility. The official report described it as an unfortunate containment breach. A respected scientist killed by the very pathogen he was studying. The reality, strongly suspected but never proven, was that Spencer orchestrated Ashford's death. Ashford had become a liability. His moral objections to weaponizing progenitor, his insistence on focusing purely on beneficial mutations, his resistance to human experimentation, these scruples threatened the entire project. Spencer needed researchers who would do what was necessary without ethical hesitation. Ashford would not, so Ashford had to go. A small containment breach, easily staged. Progenitor was fatal to most humans. Ashford became another casualty of the virus, and Spencer consolidated power. With Ashford dead, only Spencer and Marcus remained as Umbrella's founders. The company was Spencer's now, completely under his control. Marcus continued his research at the training facility, unaware that he had just witnessed a demonstration of how Spencer dealt with obstacles. The years that followed, from 1968 to 1978, were marked by intensive research but limited progress. Progenitor was incredibly lethal. Almost everyone exposed to the virus died. The rare survivors exhibited the enhanced capabilities the founders had sought, but the mortality rate made Progenitor unusable for Spencer's eugenics program. You cannot create a master race if 99% of candidates die during transformation. The virus needed to be modified, weakened in lethality, but maintaining its mutagenic properties. Both Spencer and Marcus worked on this problem independently. Spencer at the Arklay laboratory beneath his mansion, Marcus at the training facility. They tested different approaches. Spencer experimented with multiple progenitor strains, designated type A and type B, attempting to identify variations with lower mortality rates. Marcus took a different approach. He began combining progenitor with genetic material from other organisms, attempting to create hybrid viruses that retained mutagenic properties while being less immediately fatal. Marcus ran experiments on countless species. Insects showed limited mutation, some increased size and aggression, but insects had essentially reached an evolutionary dead end millions of years ago. There was not much potential for further adaptation. Amphibians responded better. Frogs infected with progenitor developed enhanced jumping power and abnormal tongue growth, though their intelligence remained unchanged and their appetite increased to dangerous levels. They became aggressive predators, but nothing that could be controlled or weaponized effectively. Then Marcus turned to leeches. Leeches were simple organisms, segmented worms with primitive nervous systems. They fed on blood, attached to hosts for days or weeks, could survive in diverse environments. Marcus theorized that their simplicity might make them ideal viral vectors, organisms that could carry and transmit the virus while being relatively easy to control. He was spectacularly correct. In September 1977, Marcus successfully combined progenitor with leech DNA. The hybrid organism, leech cells infected with the virus, exhibited remarkable properties. The leeches grew dramatically in size, developing enhanced strength and, surprisingly, increased neural capacity. They could be trained to follow simple commands. They could coordinate group behavior. Most remarkably, they could reproduce while infected, creating offspring that carried the modified virus in their genetic structure. But Marcus did not announce his breakthrough. His paranoia regarding Spencer had intensified over the years. He suspected, correctly, that Spencer was monitoring his work, waiting to steal any significant discoveries. Marcus confided only in Bailey, sending coded telegrams to the African lab describing his progress. He refined the virus over the following months, testing it on additional leech populations, documenting the mutations, perfecting the genetic combination. In January 1978, Marcus achieved what would become the most significant breakthrough in bioweapons history. He successfully stabilized the progenitor leech hybrid into a distinct viral strain. This new virus retained progenitor's mutagenic properties, but with a crucial difference: it could infect humans without the near universal fatality rate. The mortality rate was still high, perhaps 60 to 70%, but that left 30 to 40% survival, enough to be useful. Those who survived infection did not become superhumans in the endopious sense. Instead, they underwent a different transformation, one that would define horror for the next several decades. Marcus called his creation the tyrant virus, or T-virus, named for the ultimate bioweapon he envisioned: a tyrant, a humanoid creature of enhanced strength and durability that could follow basic commands and serve as a living weapon. The T-virus was version 3.0 in the progression from the natural stairway to the sunflowers through progenitor to this weaponized form. But Marcus still did not share his discovery with Spencer or Umbrella's leadership. He intended to present his findings directly to the executive board, bypassing Spencer entirely, using the T-virus as leverage to gain a seat on that board and secure his position within the company. He believed his breakthrough gave him power, made him untouchable. He was wrong. Spencer learned about the T-virus through his monitoring of Marcus's communications with Bailey. On July 29, 1978, Spencer officially shut down the Umbrella Executive Training School. Students were transferred to other facilities. Marcus was stripped of his teaching position. The T-virus project was transferred to the Arklay Laboratory, now under the direction of Spencer's most promising young researchers, Dr. William Birkin and Dr. Albert Wesker. Birkin and Wesker had been Marcus's star pupils, two child prodigies who excelled in the training program. Birkin earned his doctorate at 15 and was hired by Umbrella at that age, making him the youngest researcher in company history. Wesker was equally brilliant, with a ruthless personality perfectly suited to Umbrella's real mission. Marcus had taught them virology, molecular biology, genetic engineering. He had trained them to be exceptional scientists. He had also, unknowingly, trained them to betray him. Spencer transferred Birkin and Wesker to the Arklay laboratory with instructions to continue T-virus research while simultaneously spying on Marcus. The two young scientists were told to compile evidence of Marcus's activities, document any ethical violations, and report directly to Spencer. They did exactly that. Over the course of their education, they had witnessed Marcus using training school students as test subjects, exposing them to progenitor and T virus variants, observing the results of infection. More than 20 students had disappeared during Marcus's tenure, their bodies disposed of in underground streams or preserved as specimens. Birkin and Wesker documented all of it, sending detailed reports to Spencer. Marcus, meanwhile, continued working at the now closed training facility, refusing to leave his laboratory. He refined the T virus, created the first T virus based bioorganic weapons, including plague crawlers, lurkers, and eliminators. He became increasingly isolated, spending weeks at a time locked in his private lab, obsessed with his research and with his plans to overthrow Spencer. His mental state deteriorated. He began using his own research assistants as guinea pigs for leech experiments, infecting them to observe the results. Spencer's paranoia peaked. Marcus was no longer just a liability, but an active threat. He had to be eliminated. In 1988, Spencer gave the order. Birkin and Wesker were to facilitate Marcus's assassination. On that day in 1988, Birkin and Wesker arrived at the training facility, accompanied by a team from Umbrella Security Service. They found Marcus in his laboratory, surrounded by leech tanks, research notes, and the results of a decade of obsessive experimentation. The USS Commandos gunned him down. Marcus died on the floor of his own lab, murdered by the company he had helped found, betrayed by the students he had trained. Birkin and Wesker collected all of Marcus's research data, 10 years of work he had kept secret from Spencer, and left his body where it fell. They also disposed of what they considered failed experiments, including a queen leech that Marcus had been developing, a creature of enormous size with unusual neural capacity. They dumped the queen leech into the same underground stream where Marcus had disposed of student corpses over the years. This was meant to be the end of Marcus's story, the founder who became an obstacle, eliminated and forgotten. Birkin was officially credited with creating the T-virus. Marcus's name was all but erased from Umbrella's company records, and research continued under Spencer's complete control. The T-virus project moved forward at the Arklay laboratory, now with Birkin as its lead researcher and access to all of Marcus's notes and samples. But Marcus's story was not over. The queen leech, dumped in the river alongside Marcus's corpse, entered his body. It began feeding on his tissues, absorbing his DNA, ingesting his brain cells, and with them his memories. The T-virus was designed to mutate organisms, to rewrite their genetic structure. The queen leech mutated, incorporating Marcus's genetic material into its own. Over the course of 10 years, from 1988 to 1998, the leech essentially became Marcus, reconstructing his body, his appearance, even his consciousness from the absorbed cellular material. This was unprecedented. The T virus had created a clone through parasitic absorption, a new organism that was neither leech nor human, but something combining both. The Marcus that emerged in 1998 was not the original man, but a biological facsimile with his memories, his personality, his rage. And that rage was considerable. The Queen Leech Marcus hybrid remembered the betrayal, the assassination, the theft of his life's work. It wanted revenge. In 1998, this hybrid initiated a plan to destroy Umbrella and everyone responsible for Marcus's death. It infiltrated the Arklay laboratory, releasing the T virus throughout the facility and the surrounding forest. It attacked the Ecliptic Express, a luxury train for transporting umbrella employees, infecting everyone aboard and turning them into zombies. It spread the virus to the recently reopened training facility. The goal was to expose Umbrella's bioweapons research, to force a public reckoning, to see Spencer and his company destroyed. The events that followed in July 1998 would lead to the Mansion incident, the deployment of the Raccoon City Police Department's STARS teams, and eventually the complete destruction of Raccoon City. But those stories belong to a different narrative. What matters for understanding the T virus's origin is that the Queen, Leech Marcus, was stopped before it could fully execute its revenge. STARS officer Rebecca Chambers and former Marine Billy Cohen fought their way through the infected train and training facility, eventually confronting the creature in its fully mutated form. They discovered its weakness: ultraviolet light from sunlight, which destroyed the T virus's cellular structure and killed it. Marcus died again, this time permanently. But his creation, the T virus, lived on, and it would kill millions. This brings us to what the T virus actually is, mechanically and biologically. Understanding its origin in African flowers and leech DNA only explains the how of its creation. To understand what made it so catastrophic, we need to examine what the virus does at the cellular level, how it transforms living organisms into the monsters that define the Resident Evil franchise. The T virus is a retrovirus, meaning it inserts its genetic material into host DNA. When the virus makes contact with a cell membrane, it uses a process called reverse transcription to copy its RNA and integrate it into the host's genetic code. This effectively hijacks the cell's normal functions, reprogramming it to produce copies of the virus. These new variants are then released to infect neighboring cells, beginning the process again. But T virus does more than just replicate. It actively rewrites host DNA, triggering mutations throughout the body. The exact nature of these mutations depends on several factors: the host species, the viral strain, the method of infection, and the individual host genetic makeup. But certain effects are consistent across most infections. First, the virus causes aggressive cellular breakdown, a process called necrosis. The T virus consumes cellular material to produce energy, essentially eating the host from the inside. This breakdown causes the infected organism to literally rot while still alive. Skin becomes discolored and begins sloughing off. Internal organs fail. The body enters a state that should be death, but is not, maintained in a horrific twilight by viral activity that keeps basic functions operational. Second, the virus triggers changes to the host's central nervous system. In humans, all higher brain functions are destroyed. The prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, the areas responsible for reasoning, memory, personality, all of this neural tissue dies or becomes irreparably damaged. What remains is the brainstem, the primitive reptilian brain that handles basic drives. The infected human becomes a zombie in the classical sense, a body without consciousness, driven by the most fundamental biological imperative: feed. This feeding drive is incredibly powerful. T virus zombies attack anything that moves, attempting to bite and consume living flesh. This serves the virus's reproductive strategy. Each bite potentially transmits the virus to a new host. The zombie is a vector, a walking infection delivery system, and because the virus keeps the host mobile even after death, even after the body should have collapsed from organ failure, zombies can continue spreading the virus for extended periods. Third, The virus dramatically increases the host's physical durability in specific ways. Pain response is eliminated. Zombies do not register injury the way living humans do. They can continue functioning with massive trauma that would incapacitate or kill a normal person. Broken limbs, gunshot wounds, even partial decapitation may not stop them. Only destruction of the brainstem, severing the few neural pathways the virus still uses, will truly kill a T virus zombie. However, this durability is not infinite. The cellular breakdown continues throughout infection. Zombies decay, slowly but steadily. Eventually, the body becomes too damaged to function and collapses. The timeline varies depending on environmental conditions. Heat and humidity accelerate decay, but most T virus zombies have a functional lifespan of several weeks to a few months after initial infection. The infection process itself takes approximately 5 to 6 hours in humans. Someone bitten by a zombie will initially experience fever, nausea, and pain at the bite site. Over the following hours, fever intensifies, consciousness becomes intermittent, and the victim enters a coma-like state. During this period, the virus is rewriting their DNA, destroying higher brain functions, and triggering the mutations that will create a zombie. When the victim wakes, they are no longer themselves. The person is gone. Only the virus remains wearing their body, but zombies were never the intended goal of T virus research. Marcus designed the virus to create tyrants, intelligent, powerful bioweapons that could follow commands and serve military purposes. The zombie outcome was a side effect, a mutation that occurred in hosts who lacked specific genetic characteristics necessary for controlled transformation. The T virus affects different species in different ways. In insects, it primarily causes gigantism. Spiders, wasps, and moths grow to enormous sizes, 5 or 10 times their normal dimensions, while retaining their basic behavioral patterns. In reptiles, particularly in combination with human genetic material, the virus creates hunters, bipedal creatures with enhanced strength, speed, and most dangerously, pack intelligence. In mammals like dogs, the virus produces Cerberus specimens, infected canines with exposed muscle tissue, enhanced aggression, and the same elimination of pain response seen in human zombies. Plants infected with T virus undergo dramatic mutations as well. Plant 42, one of the most documented T virus plant infections, grew into a massive carnivorous organism that filled an entire room, developing tentacle-like vines capable of grabbing and crushing prey. The virus's ability to mutate across such diverse forms of life is what made it so dangerous. It was not species specific. Anything biological could potentially be infected and transformed. Over the years following Marcus's initial breakthrough, umbrella researchers developed numerous T virus strains, each with slightly different properties. Birkin continued refining the virus at the Arklay laboratory throughout the 1980s and 1990s, attempting to solve the intelligence problem. Spencer wanted bioweapons that could follow orders, not mindless zombies that attacked indiscriminately. This led to the development of specialized strains like NET, which was used in the Nemesis project to create BOWs capable of pursuing specific targets. Wesker and Birkin also experimented with combining the T virus with genes from other viruses. They spliced Ebola RNA into the T virus in the late 1970s, creating a variant that could bypass the human immune system more effectively, increasing the survival rate during initial infection and thus increasing the number of zombies produced versus outright deaths. This Ebola T hybrid became one of the most widely used strains in Umbrella's bioweapon program. By the mid 1990s, Umbrella had multiple T virus variants in active development. The Epsilon strain, the VAX strain, which could create more aggressive crimson head zombies, and numerous experimental strains tested on human subjects at facilities across the globe. The virus that Marcus had created as a single strain in 1978 had become a family of related pathogens, each with different lethality rates, mutation effects, and tactical applications. But every variant traced back to the same source, the progenitor virus from West African flowers. The leeches Marcus used for genetic splicing, the decade of research he conducted in isolation, the betrayal that killed him, the queen leech that absorbed his corpse and became him again. The T virus's origin is inseparable from the story of James Marcus, brilliant, paranoid, obsessive, murdered, reborn, and eventually destroyed again while his creation outlived him and killed millions. This was never supposed to happen. The Ndapaya kept their flowers secret for centuries, specifically because they understood, at some intuitive level, that what the stairway to the sun contained should not leave their caverns. The virus existed in a natural balance. Rare infections, few survivors, controlled cultural transmission through ritual. When Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus dragged Progenitor out of its original ecosystem and attempted to weaponize it, they broke that balance. They took an ancient pathogen that had learned to coexist with its host species and twisted it into something that could only destroy. Every zombie that has ever shambled through the streets of Raccoon City traces its lineage back to those caverns in West Africa. Every hunter that has torn apart stars members exist because Marcus combined virus with leech. Every outbreak, every quarantine failure, every city lost to biohazard, all of it stems from three men in 1966 who read a 19th century encyclopedia and decided they could control forces they did not understand. The T virus was not created in a laboratory. It was discovered in flowers that should have remained buried. It was cultivated through betrayal and murder. It was perfected through human experimentation on students who thought they were being trained, not used as test subjects. It was unleashed through revenge by a creature that was no longer human seeking to destroy the company that stole its life. And here is perhaps the most chilling aspect of the T virus's origin. It was entirely predictable. From the moment Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus removed those flowers from the Ndapaya caverns, every subsequent event followed with cold, logical progression. Weaponizing a virus requires testing. Testing requires subjects. Subjects die. Evidence must be hidden. Witnesses must be silenced. Power consolidates around whoever is most ruthless. The scientist who objects dies in a laboratory accident. The scientist who knows too much is assassinated by his students. The students become monsters themselves, continuing the research, creating more viruses, causing more death. There is a common misconception that the T virus origin story is about science going wrong, about good intentions corrupted. This is not accurate. The intentions were never good. Spencer wanted to rule the world through a master race he would create and control. Marcus wanted to overthrow his colleague and claim dominance within Umbrella. Ashford pursued knowledge without considering consequences until consequences killed him. There was no noble goal corrupted. There was only ambition, paranoia, and the willingness to sacrifice others for personal advancement. The T virus is what happens when you give such people access to a mutagenic pathogen and unlimited funding. The flowers were the weapon, the scientists were the delivery system, and humanity became the target, the future of the virus, evolution beyond extinction. The T virus did not end with Raccoon City. That is perhaps the most terrifying truth about Marcus's creation. When the nuclear equivalent thermobaric missiles obliterated Raccoon City on October 1st, 1998, incinerating approximately 100,000 people and reducing the urban center to ash and radiation, many believed the T virus threat had been contained. The virus had been cauterized, burned out of existence along with everything it had infected. The nightmare was over. They were catastrophically wrong. The T virus survived Raccoon City. Samples existed in laboratories across the globe, stored in freezers and research facilities that Umbrella had established on every continent. When Umbrella Corporation collapsed in 2003, found guilty on all charges related to the Raccoon City disaster, its assets were seized, liquidated, scattered. But bioweapons research does not simply disappear when a company goes bankrupt. The knowledge transfers, the samples transfer. The scientists who created the viruses find new employment with new organizations that have the same goals under different names. Umbrella died, but the T virus lived on, and it evolved. In the years following Raccoon City's destruction, multiple organizations acquired T virus samples and research data. Some were legitimate, governments developing vaccines and defensive countermeasures, preparing for potential bioterrorist attacks. Others were considerably less legitimate, black market weapons dealers, terrorist cells, rogue nations seeking biological weapons programs without the expense of developing their own pathogens from scratch. The T virus became proliferated, disseminated, available to anyone with sufficient funding and connections. But the T virus also became obsolete. By the mid 2000s, researchers recognized that Marcus's creation, revolutionary as it had been in 1978, possessed fundamental limitations that made it ineffective for modern bioweapons development. The zombie outcome was too uncontrollable. The mortality rate was too high. The host intelligence was too degraded. You could not direct a zombie army, could not give them tactical objectives, could not trust them to distinguish between enemies and allies. They simply attacked everything that moved, including each other when no other targets were available. The T virus had proven that biological weapons were viable. What the new generation of virologists needed was something that retained the T virus's mutagenic properties while eliminating its control problems. They needed bioweapons that could think, that could follow orders, that could be deployed strategically rather than just released in the hope that they would kill the right people before being neutralized. This led to the development of successor viruses, each building on the T virus foundation while attempting to solve its inherent flaws. The most significant of these was the C virus, the chrysalid virus, which represented the next major evolution in the viral lineage that began with the stairway to the sunflowers. The C virus was created in 2001 by Dr. Carla Radames, a child prodigy who graduated from university with a doctorate in genetics at age 15. She was recruited immediately by the Simmons Foundation, a powerful organization with deep ties to global intelligence agencies and black operations programs. The foundation assigned her to develop a new generation of bioweapons, giving her access to viral samples and research data that had been acquired during Umbrella's collapse. Radames approached the problem methodically, as she began with the progenitor virus, going back to the original African pathogen that had spawned the T virus and every other umbrella bioweapon. She then incorporated genetic material from the T. veronica virus, a variant created by Alexia Ashford in the 1980s that had shown the ability to preserve host intelligence during mutation. Finally, she spliced in genes from the G virus, William Birkin's creation that Radames obtained through a sample taken from Sherry Birkin who had been infected with G virus during the Raccoon City outbreak but survived through treatment. The result was something that combined the best properties of all three predecessor viruses. The C virus could trigger rapid, controlled mutations. It preserved cognitive function in its hosts, allowing them to use weapons, follow complex instructions, and coordinate tactical operations. Most importantly, it could be administered in multiple forms: injection, aerosol, even oral consumption, making it far more versatile than the T virus had ever been. Humans infected with the C virus became creatures called Javo, from the Serbian word for demons. Javo retained enough intelligence to use firearms, operate vehicles, and communicate with each other. Their bodies underwent partial mutation: cracked skin, additional eyes growing on the head, enhanced strength and speed. But they remained recognizably human, at least initially. When a Javo sustained sufficient damage to any part of their body, that specific area would undergo complete mutation, transforming into a specialized weapon. An arm might become a blade or a pincer. A head might become armored or develop sensory organs. The mutations were reactive, adaptive, responding to combat conditions in real time. But the C virus offered even more possibilities. By introducing specific animal DNA during the infection process, Radames could control what type of creature emerged from the mutation. The virus served as a retroviral vector, a biological delivery system that would express whatever genetic instructions were combined with it. This meant that a single virus could produce dozens of different bioweapon variants, each tailored for specific tactical roles. More sinister still was the C virus's use in human cloning. Radam's employer, Derek Simmons, was a high-ranking government official who had become obsessed with the spy Ada Wong. He wanted Radams to create a perfect clone of Wong using C virus transformation. The project required 12,135 attempts. Each previous test subject was injected with a C virus strain that contained Wong's DNA, and each transformed into a deformed mutant that bore only vague resemblance to the original, until Radams herself was forcibly used as the final test subject in April 2009, injected against her will, and transformed into a perfect genetic duplicate of Ada Wong. The transformation stripped away Radam's original identity, overriding her appearance, her voice, even aspects of her personality with Wong's genetic template. She emerged from the chrysalid, the cocoon stage where C virus mutations occurred, as a perfect replica. For months she believed she was Ada Wong, but eventually her original memories began to resurface. Fragmented and traumatic, she remembered being Radam's. She remembered what Simmons had done to her, and she decided that the entire world would pay for that violation. This is where the C virus became truly catastrophic. In 2012 and 2013, Radams orchestrated a series of bioterrorist attacks across multiple countries, using the C virus to create widespread outbreaks designed to destabilize global order. She distributed the virus to the Adonian Liberation Army in Eastern Europe, disguised as nutritional supplements, infecting their soldiers and turning them into Javo. She released an airborne strain at Marhawa Academy in Asia, transforming students and faculty into zombies. She deployed Javo forces in Tall Oaks, United States, and Lansheng, China, creating chaos on 3 continents simultaneously. But Radam's most significant achievement was the enhanced C virus, a variant so powerful that only 3 samples were ever created. This development required the blood of Jake Muller, the son of Albert Wesker. Muller had inherited his father's extraordinary immune system, a genetic trait that made him resistant to viral infection. When Radams captured Muller in Edonia and spent 6 months extracting and analyzing his blood, she discovered that his antibodies could be used to create a C virus strain that bypassed the normal limitations of mutation. The enhanced C virus eliminated the chrysalid stage entirely. Hosts injected with it would transform immediately, without the vulnerable cocoon period. More remarkably, they could mutate continuously, adapting to injuries by developing new forms, shifting between different configurations without cellular breakdown. A host infected with enhanced C virus could theoretically mutate infinitely, becoming progressively more powerful with each transformation, while retaining their intelligence and sense of self. Only 3 people were ever infected with enhanced C virus. Derek Simmons was injected after his plans began unraveling, transforming him into a creature that could shift between 3 different monstrous forms, each more grotesque than the last. Carla Radamas injected herself after being fatally shot, mutating into an enormous, amorphous blob that consumed everything it touched. And Piers Nivens, a BSAA soldier fighting alongside Chris Redfield, deliberately infected himself to gain the power necessary to destroy a massive bioweapon called Chaos, sacrificing his humanity to save his commander. All 3 died. Simmons was killed after days of continuous mutation left him unable to distinguish friend from enemy, his body constantly transforming in response to combat stress. Radams's blob form was destroyed by Ada Wong. Nevins, recognizing that his mutation was irreversible, pushed Chris into an escape pod and used his C virus powers to destroy the entire facility, killing himself in the process. The enhanced C virus demonstrated both the ultimate potential and the ultimate futility of bioweapons development. Here was a virus that could create near invincible mutants, that could grant superhuman abilities without the total loss of consciousness seen in T-virus zombies, and yet all it produced was death. The enhanced C virus did not create soldiers or weapons. It created monsters that killed everyone around them and then died themselves, either from combat or from the psychological breakdown that accompanied endless mutation. After the C virus attacks of 2013 were contained, Jake Muller's blood was used to develop anti-C, a vaccine that could neutralize C virus infection. The U.S. government paid Muller his demanded $50 million for the blood samples necessary to mass produce the vaccine. Radams died. Simmons died. Neo Umbrella, the terrorist organization she had built, collapsed. The C virus threat appeared to be over, but again, the virus survived. Samples existed, research data existed, and the fundamental problem that had driven C virus development, the desire for controllable bioweapons, remained unsolved. Future researchers would look at the C virus's achievements and failures and attempt to create something even more refined, even more controllable, even more catastrophic. This is the pattern that has defined the post-T virus world. Each new virus is developed to solve the problems of its predecessor. Each new outbreak demonstrates why biological weapons cannot be controlled, and each new disaster is followed by assurances that this time, finally, the threat has been contained, the samples destroyed, the research terminated, until the next virus emerges and the cycle begins again. The T virus was supposed to create tyrants, intelligent bioweapons that could follow orders. It created zombies instead, mindless, uncontrollable, attacking everything indiscriminately. The C virus was supposed to fix the intelligence problem, creating Javo that could be directed tactically. It created terrorists who used the virus against its creators, turning the bioweapon back on the organizations that developed it. Every attempt to weaponize mutation has produced catastrophe for the weaponizers, and yet the research continues. In the years following the C virus outbreaks, other organizations have pursued their own viral programs. The Connections Crime Syndicate developed the mold, a fungal organism with mutagenic properties similar to viruses but with different transmission vectors and infection methods. Mother Miranda, an Eastern European cult leader, used the mold to create an entire village of mutants in her attempt to resurrect her dead daughter. The bioweapons industry that Umbrella pioneered in the 1960s has metastasized into a global shadow economy where viruses, parasites, and fungal agents are traded like commodities. The T virus itself, Marcus's original creation, still appears occasionally in outbreaks. Terrorist groups acquire old samples from abandoned Umbrella facilities. Black market dealers sell vials to buyers who do not fully understand what they are purchasing. Research laboratories studying bioweapon countermeasures accidentally release containment samples. Each incident produces zombies, the classic T virus outcome, and each is contained with varying levels of success and casualty rates. But the T virus is no longer the cutting edge of bioweapons development. It is almost retro, a vintage plague superseded by more sophisticated pathogens. Modern virologists view the T virus the way weapons engineers view muskets, historically significant, pioneering in its time, but thoroughly obsolete compared to contemporary alternatives. The zombie apocalypse that the T virus promised in Raccoon City has been replaced by more targeted horrors. Javo with tactical awareness. Mold-infected humans who can regenerate from almost any injury. Parasites that turn entire populations into mind-controlled servants. Yet for all these innovations, none have achieved what Spencer originally envisioned when he read Henry Travis's encyclopedias about the Endopia. None have created the superhuman race that could be controlled and directed. Every virus produces monsters. Every attempt at biological enhancement produces tragedy. The stairway to the sun granted godhood to rare Endopia kings who survived consumption, but modern science has never replicated that success. Every viral transformation in the modern era has produced either zombies, who are effectively dead, or mutants, who lose their humanity even if they retain their intelligence. The future of the T virus and its successor viruses is more outbreaks, more containment failures, more cities quarantined or destroyed, more research facilities developing new variants in the belief that this time will be different, that this strain will finally be controllable, and more researchers dying too. The very weapons they create, as Radams did, as Simmons did, as Marcus did decades before them. The T virus's legacy is not the zombie genre it helped popularize, nor the survival horror gameplay it enabled, nor even the specific outbreaks it caused. Its legacy is the proof that biological weapons cannot be controlled once released, that viruses do not recognize political boundaries or strategic objectives, that mutation is chaos, and chaos cannot be harnessed for orderly purposes. Marcus created the T virus to make tyrants. Instead, he created a lesson about hubris, about the impossibility of controlling evolution, about what happens when scientists believe they can weaponize the fundamental processes of life without consequences. That lesson has been taught repeatedly across the decades since 1978. It was taught in Raccoon City in 1998. It was taught in the C virus outbreaks of 2013. It will be taught again in future outbreaks, in future cities, with future viruses developed by future researchers who believe they will succeed where all their predecessors failed. The T virus began in flowers that the Endopia worshipped as sacred and feared as deadly. It will end, if it ever ends, when humanity finally learns what the Endopia knew, that some powers are too dangerous to wield, that some secrets should remain buried, that some doorways, once opened, can never be closed again. Until that lesson is learned, the T virus and its descendants will continue to spread, to mutate, to kill, following the only imperative that viruses understand: infect, replicate, and spread. The Queen Leech that became Marcus wanted revenge on Umbrella. It got that revenge. Umbrella is gone, destroyed by the very virus it tried to control. But the revenge was incomplete, because the virus survived. Marcus's creation outlived both Marcus and the company that killed him, and it will outlive everyone who encounters it, because that is what viruses do. They outlive their hosts, they outlive their creators, they persist through every attempt to eliminate them, waiting in frozen samples, in preserved research notes, in the minds of scientists who remember how to recreate them. That is the true origin and the true future of the T virus. Not a beginning or an ending, but a continuous present tense. The virus exists, the virus spreads, the virus kills, the virus persists. From the Endopia caverns to Raccoon City to the global outbreaks of the 2010s and beyond, the pattern remains constant. Humanity discovers or creates a mutagenic pathogen. Humanity attempts to weaponize it. The pathogen escapes. The pathogen kills indiscriminately. Humanity contains the outbreak at enormous cost. And then, inevitably, humanity tries again with a new virus, believing this time will be different. The T virus proved it will never be different, but proving something and learning from that proof are not the same. The lesson remains unlearned, the research continues, and the viruses wait, patient as only biological processes can be patient, for the next outbreak, the next city, the next catastrophe that will follow from humanity's refusal to leave ancient poisons buried where they belong. Understanding this origin is crucial because it informs everything that follows in the Resident Evil timeline. The Raccoon City outbreak in 1998, which killed approximately 100,000 people and required a nuclear strike to contain, happened because the Queen Leech Marcus hybrid released the T virus in revenge. That revenge was possible because Spencer had Marcus assassinated in 1988. That assassination was necessary because Marcus had perfected the T virus in 1978. That perfection was achievable because Spencer forced the Endopia to give up their sacred caverns in 1966. Every death in Raccoon City traces back to flowers in West Africa. Every victim of Umbrella's bioweapons connects to choices made by three men who believed they could control evolution. The T virus is the answer to what happens when you attempt to play God with biological forces that existed millions of years before humans walked the earth. The answer is everyone dies. The scientists who created it, the soldiers deployed against it, the civilians caught in outbreaks, the cities where it spreads. Everyone dies. Eventually, even the virus dies, as it runs out of hosts and collapses under its own lethality. But before it dies, it takes millions with it, and that is the true origin of the T virus, not in scientific innovation or unfortunate accidents, but in the fundamental arrogance of believing that ancient forces can be controlled, weaponized, and deployed without consequences. The Endopia knew better. They kept the flowers hidden, guarded, sacred. They understood that some things should remain buried in the dark where they evolved, but they could not withstand modern weapons and modern ambition. Their defenses failed. The flowers were taken. The virus was released. and the world has been paying the price ever since. Marcus's greatest achievement was also humanity's greatest curse. The T virus represents the pinnacle of bioweapons development and the nadir of human judgment. It is elegantly designed from a virological perspective: high transmission rate, effective mutation triggers, cross species compatibility, extended host mobility post infection. If your goal is to create the perfect agent of biological warfare, the T virus succeeds brilliantly. It does exactly what it was designed to do: infect, transform, spread, and kill. The problem, of course, is that bioweapons do not recognize the distinction between enemy soldiers and civilian populations. They do not stop at national borders. They do not respond to ceasefire orders. Once released, they follow only viral imperatives: infect, replicate, spread. The T virus does not care about Umbrella's corporate interests, or Spencer's eugenics dreams, or Marcus's revenge. It cares about cellular hijacking and genetic replication. Everything else is human meaning imposed on a biological process that exists beyond human concerns. This is why the T virus ultimately destroyed Umbrella Corporation itself. In 1998, the Arklay laboratory outbreak led to STAR's investigation and the first real evidence of Umbrella's bioweapons program reaching public awareness. In September 1998, the Raccoon City outbreak forced the U.S. government to nuclear strike an American city to contain viral spread. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Umbrella's stock price collapsed. Legal proceedings began. In 2003, the company was found guilty on all charges related to the Raccoon City disaster. By 2004, Umbrella Corporation ceased to exist as a functioning entity. Spencer survived the company's fall, went into hiding, and spent his final years as a fugitive before being killed by Albert Wesker in 2006. Marcus was already long dead, killed twice, once by assassination, once in combat as a leech hybrid. Ashford died in 1968. The three founders of Umbrella, the three men who brought Progenitor out of Africa, are all dead. Their company is dead. Their eugenics project collapsed. Their bioweapons were used against them by former employees. The T virus they created turned on its creators and consumed them. But the virus itself survives. Samples exist in facilities across the world, kept by governments and corporations for research purposes, for potential vaccine development, for defensive bioweapons programs. The knowledge of how to create it has been disseminated through stolen research data, through defecting scientists, through black market trafficking. The T virus cannot be uninvented. It cannot be forgotten. It will always exist now, a permanent addition to humanity's arsenal of ways to destroy itself. And it all began with flowers in a cave, worshipped by a people who understood that some poisons are too powerful to wield, that some mutations are too dangerous to pursue, that some secrets are kept secret for good reason. The Endopia tried to protect the world from the stairway to the sun. They failed. And so we live in a world where the T virus exists, where future outbreaks are not just possible but probable, where the ancient pathogen that granted godhood to Stone Age kings has been twisted into a weapon that grants only death. The true origin of the T virus is not a date, or a place, or a scientific formula. It is a choice. The choice to take what should not be taken, to weaponize what should not be weaponized, to believe that human intelligence can master forces that operated before intelligence evolved. That choice was made in 1966 when Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus entered the Endopia caverns. Every subsequent event follows from that choice: Marcus's assassination, the Queen Leech's revenge, the Raccoon City outbreak, the millions dead from T virus infections worldwide. All of it traces back to three men who looked at flowers that killed most who consumed them and thought, we can use this. They were right, they could use it. The T virus worked exactly as designed. It infected, it mutated, it killed, it created bioweapons of staggering effectiveness. And in doing so, it proved that just because something can be done does not mean it should be done. Just because a virus can be weaponized does not mean weaponizing it is wise. Just because power can be seized does not mean seizing it will lead anywhere but to destruction. The Endopaya's sacred flowers became humanity's curse. The stairway to the sun, which they climbed toward potential divinity, became a descent into hell for millions. The virus that granted superhuman abilities to rare survivors granted only suffering to everyone else. And at the bottom of it all, beneath the outbreaks and the zombie hordes and the corporate conspiracies and the government cover ups, there is this simple fact: it did not have to happen. The flowers could have remained hidden. The virus could have stayed contained in its original ecosystem. The caverns could have remained sacred and sealed, but they did not. And so the T virus exists, and so the world must live with that existence, knowing that somewhere, in some laboratory, samples of Marcus's creation are stored and studied and potentially weaponized again. The origin of the T virus is the origin of a nightmare that has no ending, only containment, only management, only the hope that the next outbreak can be stopped before it spreads too far. Sleep well with that knowledge. Sleep knowing that ancient poisons, once released, cannot be put back. Sleep knowing that the T virus is real within its fiction, and the impulses that created it, ambition, paranoia, the desire to control nature, are very real in our world. The stairway to the sunflowers may be fictional, but the mindset that would harvest them, study them, weaponize them, and unleash them exists in laboratories and military installations across our actual planet. The T virus is a warning written in base pairs and zombie moans, a warning that we have the capacity to create horrors beyond imagination when we prioritize power over wisdom, ambition over caution, profit over safety. Marcus created the T virus, but we create the conditions that allow men like Marcus, Spencer, and Ashford to pursue such research. We fund the corporations. We fight the wars that require bioweapons. We accept the logic that says some research is too important to stop, even when that research might kill us all. The true origin of the T virus is humanity's inability to leave dangerous things alone, to see a poisonous flower and think, I should eat that, to see a lethal virus and think, I should weaponize that, to see a civilization destroyed by biological horror and think, but I will control it better. That impulse, that arrogance, that certainty that this time will be different, that this time we will maintain control, that is where the T virus comes from, not from Africa or leeches or laboratories, but from the part of human nature that always thinks it can handle forces it does not understand. The T virus is what happens when that certainty meets reality, when the controlled experiment escapes containment, when the bioweapon infects its creators, when the line between research and catastrophe disappears because it was never as solid as the scientists believed. Marcus thought he controlled the T virus. He died with his face being eaten by his own leeches. Spencer thought he controlled Umbrella. He died, hunted, and alone. The Endopaya thought they could protect their secrets. Their civilization was destroyed, their people displaced, their sacred caverns ransacked. No one controlled anything. The virus controlled them. And now, in the fiction of Resident Evil's universe, it continues to spread, to mutate, to create new horrors from old DNA, because that is what viruses do. They do not stop. They do not negotiate. They do not care about human intentions or human suffering. They simply replicate, infect, transform, and spread. That is the origin of the T virus. Not a beginning, but an opening of a door that can never be closed again.